But anyway, speaking about open source, I mentioned Grafana. Let's talk a little bit about them. They also had a pretty big announcement, actually, that they got another round of funding. I'm trying to see what it was here. The numbers are similar. So $270 million in additional funding. Announced that they've hit 250 million in ARR, and of course, we're identified as a leader in the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant for observability. And overall, this is good news for them. I mean, Grafana is, if you don't know them, they are one of the original observability players. They're an open source pedigree in terms of how they sort of came to market, and have done, they sort of were the standard. Now, I think there's a lot of folks that have had historically made their business by going out and saying, hey, we use Grafana at our core. Now we built, it's the open source way, right? We'll tell us all the other stuff around it. And so Grafana has attempted to steal back some of that market and have introduced a much more robust product line to sort of flesh all of that out. But I think overall this is good. It's a good sign for the market. It's a good sign for them. And but again, it goes back to sort of what we were talking about, that open source. I take a skeptical eye towards it because open source is always never truly. It's not about getting free stuff. So it's just sort of an attitude in how you approach it.
Right. But this is also a great time for Grafana because of the importance of cloud observability in general. For so many years, observability was really limited to looking at network behavior simply because that was just a much larger market. And all we could really do is kind of look at packets. But now that we are trying to look at so many different types of activity that go through cloud computing, this is really an interesting inflection point for the observability market in general, because I feel like although it is a mature market in some respects from an operational perspective, we still have yet to see how observability leads to things like financial management. I love the FinOps topic so much, and seeing directly how activities lead to costs is still not very easy in cloud, simply because you've got, again, billions and billions, that number keeps coming up, of activities that any enterprise has, any with its large cloud deployments. So the only way to look at that is through observability as a starting point. I remember back when Grafana was trying to make its way as a real-time visualization solution, and really looking at themselves just as a BI solution, which really undersold its capabilities. So I'm glad that they found this observability use case and have been so successful as a market leader, obviously, in this space for now a number of years.
Yeah, and I do agree. It's really positive. I mean, I've become a big fan of observability overall, mostly because I think it's to a certain extent the tail that wags the dog. I mean, we still mostly talk about observability in the context of cloud native environments that kick off a ton of digital exhaust, and we can capture all of this data and use it to actually observe what's going on. I mean, the whole reason we had monitoring in the traditional enterprise and traditional tech stack in the past was it wasn't instrumented in a way that we could actually do that. And so one of the byproducts of this, you talk about FinOps, is that it's created this sense that we should be able to do that. We should be able to collect data. We should be able to instrument it. And instead of having to predict that this is the thing I care about, collect all of this data and discern what's actually happening and whether or not I should care about it in the environment. And so I love that this is sort of infiltrating down, and you cannot have this conversation, particularly when it comes to cloud, but I think across the board, you cannot have this conversation and ignore the fact that there is performance and cost at two ends of the spectrum, and you have to find a balance point between them. And the only way you're going to do that with is data. I mean, observability is really just this fancy term that says we're going to collect all the operational data we can. We're going to feed it into something that allows us to make sense of it, right? That's really what this is about. And that's why the visualization is so important. But in order to make sense of it, I have to be looking at more than just performance. I have to be able to look at cost optimization. And Grafana, if they have a gap, in my opinion, is they're not fully going there yet. I think they will, and I think they need to. But we've talked in the past about Logic Monitor, and they just introduced a cost optimization. A company that in the Kubernetes world that I followed is Perfect Scale. They have a big focus on cost optimization. There's a number of other players out there that I think are helping organizations strike that balance point between the performance and cost and looking at it all at once. And the root of all of that is the ability to get the data. So I think, Grafana deserves a lot of credit for helping really pave the way. and opening the door to all of this. And so hopefully this will give them the means to keep fighting the good fight.
Yep, absolutely. And